that life is over just because we throw a few pennies. Everything is lost, so we fighting to get back something at any cost. But while we fighting and we fighting just to get back that little something, we forgetting we know nothing of this world in which we live in. Someone greater put this world together. In times of plenty, we must be grateful. In times of sorrow, we must be strong. In times of joy, we must be thankful. For life really have its up and its down. In times of disaster, we must be racism out the way. And if you listen to this watchword from your lover, Black Stallion, tomorrow would be a better day, a better day, a better day, a better day. We meet a world today with 4 seasons. Who is you to try and find out what's the reason? And what goes wrong so must come back wrong so. Why that is so, nobody don't know. And there are so much love, so we just got to say thanks and keep looking to the future, because this world is not yours to control. It is just to behold. In times of plenty, we must be grateful. In times of sorrow, in times of joy, we must be thankful. For life really have its up and its down. In times of disaster, we must be ready. Oh, to get together and move racism out the way. And if you listen to this watchword from your lover, Black Stallion, tomorrow would be a better day for you and you and you. As we go through this life we live in, we must know by now that this world owes us nothing. So live your life and just enjoy it. And let's try to leave this world better than we find it. Because the maker of this world with nobody have no contract, no paper that could tell you yesterday is going to come back. Look ahead for tomorrow. In times of plenty, we must be grateful. In times of sorrow, we must be strong. In times of joy, we must be thankful. For life really have its up and its down. In times of disaster, we must be ready to get together and move racism out the way. And if you listen to this watchword from your lover, Black Stallion, tomorrow would be a better day for you and you and you. Keep the faith. Good to Pastor. 1986. 85. Oi, 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 oi. Grenada, Grenada, the black man, thank you. And who will learn from them, I am sorry. But listen to the lessons Grenada teach me. Communism or socialism is the same gun head all of them on. And from the time you team up with them, like Grenada, you're straight on the losing end. My friend, got to stay away from them is all them is a nuclear weapon. Just to stay away from them is one is a better gun telling you to vote. One saying to vote with a bomb at your throat. They're saving all their arms and ammo for me and selling the wheat for the enemy. Got to stay away from them is all them is just skits. From the time you team with one of them is the first thing they're talking about is protection. Double tax of people full your treasury. You got to maintain an efficient army. And too much pressure from the opposition. They will always rent you a whole battalion. And when you get the Nexism out the way, how much life it costs you could never see. No way, got to stay away from them is all them is confusion. You must have a nuclear weapon just to hold on to your Islam. Rescue mission to help Grenada, rescue mission to Afghanistan, rescue mission going the world over, no rescue mission to South Africa. Got to stay away from them Islam. All them Islam is just schism. Remember when Grenada had an ism that everybody say was mongoose oppression? The other ism just take up some gun and they had the old mongoose back on the run. 4 years later the thing turned back wrong. It's the same mongoose doctrine preaching in tongue. And Grenadians keep suffering evermore. All the taxpayers' money going for war and more war and more war. Got to stay away from them Islam. All them Islam is confusion. You must have a nuclear weapon just to hold on to your Islam. They say how to keep forth from politics. Every year they boycotted Olympic. And while we arguing about who good and who bad, they've gone out in space and exposed the flag. Got to stay away from them Islam. All them Islam is just schism. And if you listen to this watchword from your lover, Rock Stalin, tomorrow would be a better day for you and you and you. Keep the faith. Go to Pastor. What a beautiful year, 1986. 85. Oi, 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 oi. Grenada, Grenada, the black man, thank you. Grenadian teach me my greatest lesson. And who will learn from them, I am sorry. But listen to the lessons Grenadian teach me. Communism or socialism is the same gunhead all of them on. And from the time you team up with them, like Grenada, you're straight on the losing end. My friend, got to stay away from them is all them is a misconfusion. You must have a nuclear weapon just to stay away from them is One is a better gun telling you to vote. One saying to vote with a bomb at your throat. They're saving all their arms and ammo for me and selling the wheat for the enemy. Got to stay away from them is all them is just skits. From the time you team with one of them is the first thing they're talking about is protection. Double tax of people full your treasury. You got to maintain an efficient army. And too much pressure from the opposition. They will always rent you a whole battalion. And when you get the Nexism out the way, how much life it costs you could never see. No way, no way, got to stay away from them is all them is misconfusion. You must have a nuclear weapon just to hold on to your Islam. Rescue mission to help Grenadian. Rescue mission to Afghanistan. Rescue mission going the world over. No rescue mission to South Africa. Got to stay away from them is all them is just kiss on. Remember when Grenada had an ism that everybody say was mongoose oppression? The other ism just take up some gun and they had the whole mongoose back on the run. 4 years later the thing turned back wrong. It's the same mongoose doctrine preaching in tongue. And Grenadians keep suffering evermore. All the taxpayers' money going for war and more war and more war. Got to stay away from them is all them is a misconfusion. You must have a nuclear weapon just to hold on to your Islam. They say how to keep forth from politics. Every year they boycotted Olympic. And while we arguing about who good and who bad, them going out in space and exploding flag. Got to stay away from them is All them ism is just schism. The time is right now more than ever for man to sit down and write the new order. Where man would respect a man as a man, and not through color and superior weapon. Where he must be equal, righteous, and fair, and realize that the earth is for all to share, regardless of your color, class, or race. When them ism come, you keep off the peace. Why? But to stay away from them ism. All them ism is confusion. You must have a nuclear weapon just to hold on to your ism. One ism say come, one ism say go. One ism say yes, the next one say no. And while we keep fighting, there is a war. We people keep getting poor and more poor. But to stay away from them ism. All them ism is just schism. Love you, sir.
Oh, yes. Dr. Leroy Callis, the Black Stallion, the black man himself. One of the great calypsos. There's so many great calypsos, but that one, of course, chronicling an important period in Caribbean history, the Grenadian Revolution of 1979-83. Black Stallion offering a trenchant critique of what he called the isms and the schisms. At first glance, one may think that he is saying to us, stay away from ideology. That's not so. Black Stallion is one of the greatest calypso ideologue. He stood on the side of Pope, a very, very close friend of Maurice Bishop, the leader of the Grenadian Revolution. But as the Calypsonian, the wise man, the wise woman in our midst must do, and that is to take us, lift us up, and put us in front of our eyes, trying to make sense of what has happened. Historical memory. This month, October, would mark 42 years since the Grenadian Revolution, some would say, imploded. It was a time, those of us who lived through it would always remember it. I remember as a young left-wing firebrand socialist, I remember crying because for the first time I thought that we had a chance in the Caribbean to really get out of the mess that 400 years of slavery and colonialism had put us in. And at that time in the 1970s and the 1980s, if you weren't an idealist of some sort, I'll ask Jeffrey when he comes on. He's here and ready to go. And we all lived through that period, the period of ideology and so forth. And 40 odd years later, I don't think that we have made a lot of sense of that period. Certainly not as much as we think. This morning, I taped a program, which I think is going to be here tonight in Grenada. As some of you would know, the United States has asked Grenada to set up military equipment on their soil in order to, as the Americans have put it, to fight narcotics trade. And I know today, I think the Americans blew up a boat and they're asking Grenada. And it's causing quite a stir in Grenada, from what I have gleaned from listening to programs, calling programs. The Grenadians are saying no. They're saying no. And the Prime Minister has not made a decision. I understand military experts are on their way, if not yet in St. George's. But we know what has been happening in the so-called Southern Hemisphere. And here we are, once again, these tiny dots in the Caribbean Sea. Here we once again caught in the middle of what is clearly superpowers squaring off. We have China here as an economic superpower. Russia, is there in Venezuela. And the United States with their site in Venezuela. We are all caught up on Grenada. Has been asked this question, and so I've been asked to comment. As Sunday I was on a radio program in Antigua, and I think the Grenadians might have listened to that program, and they asked me to share some insights. It's always sometimes so relieving, I love Guyana and I love our politics, but sometimes it's quite a relief to, take your gaze into the larger ferment of Caribbean politics, because all of us have become so engrossed in our domestic politics that sometimes we forget that we're part of a region, a hemisphere, and a world. That David Rudder say, a world that don't need islands no more. But here is this, what I call this new world order that is being promulgated by President Trump and the Europeans and so on. And suddenly these islands have become important again in a weird kind of way. Why? Our own Dave Martin said, we struggle, we don't look for trouble. I mean, we don't create drugs, we don't provide drugs for America. There's a demand in the north, there's supply in the south, and we are in the middle. We don't trouble nobody in the Caribbean, but now here is Grenada, 42 years after an American invasion, is being asked again to be part. It's the unkindest cut for small countries which don't trouble nobody. But we'll talk more about that. We don't talk a lot here about hemispheric politics and regional politics. And we have to correct that because we are not an island. And we are part of a region. Remember, we were Caribbean before we became Guyana, and for people like myself, who they say is stuck in the 1970s. So I heard Ravi Dev and others saying that I was responsible for the loss of the APNU loss because my ideology of Black power and people's power, which is an ideology of the 1970s, was adopted by Norton and the PNC. And young people have no time with Black power, young Black people, and they rejected Black power, and they go for, I don't know what is the other power they went for. They will have to say. But they say those of us who talk about Black power, Jeffrey and others, we are the ideologues, and we gave Norton ideology. Now, Norton himself come out of the politics that all of us have come out of, and so forth. But You know, what they say, the past never disappears. It just comes in a new guise. Last night, thank you all so much. The topic last night was they want to wipe Africa off the face of Guyana, economically, politically, and so forth. But it's not my night tonight. It's Dr. Jeffrey's night. Let us bring in Dr. Henry Jeffrey. Dr. Jeffrey, good evening.
Good evening, David, and to your audience.
Recollections of the Grenada Revolution?
Well, David, I knew Maurice Bishop, well, not well, because at the time I used to be at National Development, and he was many times there after either taking briefings from McDavid or McDavid arrangements between him and Forbes Barnaby. He was quite a nice chap. And one of the, well, let me put it this way, you know, in those days, and even today, I was educated in England, and maybe that made me more cautious about this radical revolution and Soviet and Cuba and all of that, because I always thought that when you are going to do politics of that type, you need first to say what kind of power I have. You see, only just now the Calypso was saying, but I have a nuclear
weapon.
You know, I told the professor that I am coming back to Guyana and I want to go and do an MSc in cooperatives. And he said, he was trying to get me to go to Buffalo to do something else, public administration. I said, no, I want to go to Loughborough because it's close to the International Cooperative Center College, and I can get there easy, and I want to go and do an MSc. He says, but Harrison said to me, you know, it's a waste of time. He says, these small countries, they don't have the resources even to properly propagate an ideology. And then you end up to show the difficulties Russia was having, such a big country, in doing just that. So I was always more cautious in terms of radical socialism. I believe that the Caribbean just don't have, we take this thing called sovereignty seriously because we learn it in books, but this is not about sovereignty in books, so to speak. This is who actually have the power. The world today don't have a government, and it ricochets to who actually have the power. And I look at Venezuela today and I said, look, country has the most oil in the world, and yet half of its people, they're running all over helter-skelter, because I believe nothing that you are taking this ideology too seriously in terms of your own power. You are not going to change the world. What you have to do is try to live within your context in a decent fashion. Barbados and so on. They have done just that. I think you had Bernard Cord and those lots with in Grenada at the time, and they were much more radical. And they thought if they got rid of what's his name, they can just take over. And the result was the thing where Eugenia Charles helped, and the whole thing was overthrown. You have to take this thing about sovereignty with a pinch of salt. It is not a carte blanche. You can be doing anything you like in your own country. Look right here with Cheddi Jagan. Look, we didn't know, as you said, even his own people in the old party didn't know. He went about telling the Soviets, well, I got an ethnic majority, more or less that's what he was implying. I have an ethnic majority in Guyana, and this is 51, by the way. I wish to take Guyana and the Caribbean into the communist bloc. Well, who going to sit down and see that? Sovereignty or no sovereignty wasn't going to happen. And that the result is that Cheddi Jacob was kept out of government for 30 years. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when you're thinking of your country, you got to start thinking about your people, and you have to start to understand the limits of the power you have. Nobody cares much about sovereignty when you are going to threaten their fundamental rights. So when you say they ask Grenada to come, I would say to you, it depends on what for. And we don't know that. The Americans must say, what for? Why are you coming here? It can't be just, any consideration of sovereignty. For instance, suppose it is that the Grenadians are incapable or unable to deal with these drug things. They must work that out themselves and then determine if you need help. And maybe you can say to the Americans, we'll get help from elsewhere. So the world is not as simple as people look at it, that we are all sovereign states with our rights and all. It's nonsense. At the end of the day, if you want to maintain the rights, you better have nuclear weapons. And Putin is finding out, even when you got nuclear weapons, you can't determine what people really want when they are friends with more nuclear weapons than you.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here tonight. In case you're just joining us, we're talking a little bit of Caribbean politics. We are reminiscing on a little bit, reflecting on the Grenadian Revolution of 1979 to 83. And I know there are younger people on this program who may not have heard of the Grenadian Revolution. I think more people may be familiar with the Cuban Revolution of 1959. But there was a Grenadian Revolution 1979 when a set of left-wing people in the New Jewel movement, led by Maurice Bishop, overthrew the Gairy government. And that was a time of ferment in the Caribbean. Patrick John of Dominica was kicked out of power. There was a revolution just next door to us in Suriname, where some soldiers took power in early 1980. And all over the Caribbean, there was a rebellion in Union Island, St. Vincent, where some Rastafarians took up arms and wanted to secede. The Union Island to secede. It's one of the Grenadines island to secede from St. Vincent. In St. Lucia, there wasn't a revolution, but they went to the ballot boxes, and some left-wing people led by George Odlum came to power. That didn't last. It lasted for 3 years, and then it was back to the status quo. And of course, we know of Michael Manley's 1972 to 1980 democratic socialism. Eventually was kicked out of power with the help of the CIA. In our Guyana, Burnham survived, and Jeffrey would know that more than I do. But by the time the Grenadian Revolution came to an end, Burnham had seen where the wind was blowing and had begun to make overtures to Cheddi Jagan, or the other way around, and there was talk of a power-sharing government. But that was a time in the Caribbean when we experimented with alternative forms of governance. In England, they used to call it the third way. Jeffrey would know a lot about the third way. Here we talk about non-alignment, anti-imperialism, etc. But with the end of the Grenadian Revolution in 1983, the Americans made it clear that was the end of revolution as we knew it in that time in the English-speaking Caribbean. Jeffrey, what? Give us a sense, if you can, and if you would, because I think you were. You'll tell us whether you had left by that time, or you were still in the PNC. What was the conversation like during that period as this thing was unraveling?
Well, remember, as I said just now, you had a situation in which the West must have come upon information of the intent of Cheddi Jagan. And so Barnum himself, all right, let's go back a little bit, because even now people talking about Jagan and Barnum come and John Jagan. Jagan could not have controlled the urban areas. And the result is he asked the Communist Party of Britain to help him find somebody, this radical socialist there. And they're the one who found Barnum. And apparently, one of the quarrels between Jagan and Barnum apparently was because they told him he was going to be chairman. And when he came here, by which time he came, and more marches happened. And Cheddi became quite more popular. Cheddi, remember, in socialist theory, the urban areas are of importance, the proletariat. And Cheddi became quite popular. By the time Barnum arrived, probably, it looks like that was the quarrel that led him to the breakup. By the time Barnum arrived, Cheddi became popular, and then they offered Barnum the chairmanship, but they got this thing called leadership that Cheddi was. When they told Barnum he was going to be chairman, apparently he thought he'd be leader, because he saw that as the leader. So he came, and apparently that I think it's Ashton Chase or somebody had to resign as chairman.
Yeah, Ashton, yes.
To make him chairman. And the result is now you have Cheddi Jagan as the leader. And that is the first quarrel that has happened. Indeed, in the 1953 election, nobody was certain if Barnum was going to even turn up to swear in as Minister of Education. So in that period, these chaps were radicals. From the little I've read and seen, the old PPP was radical. That was their thing. But as Quyan and the others used to call Barnum, because he was in England and he traveled in Eastern Europe, he was more Titoite. He was a radical, but he wasn't tied strongly to the Marxist orientation. He was more Titoite, wants to do his own thing, wants to travel its own road, and all of that. And so when they decided that they have to get rid of Jagan, remember, when they start talking about independence and all of that, even I think you said Quayana knows this, it wasn't strictly a matter of getting rid of Jagan, but they wanted to curtail his power. Because what's happening now has some relevance in the sense that, when you have decided that you are going to do something, you as I said just now, you have to think of the limits of how far you would be allowed. You can't try to use elections, because that's it, not necessarily democracy, is ethnic voting, to say, I'm going to carry the entire Caribbean and Guyana into the communist camp. And that is infidel with the rest of the Western world. as they say, if it's one time when you can overthrow somebody and throw them out, is if they try to use democracy to end democracy. And effectively, that is what the PPP was suggesting at that time. While Barnum was much more a socialist, and Barnum refused to join their group, you know. They called Barnum thing and so on at that same Park Hotel. And I was told this by my reliable sources that Barnum refused to have anything to do with it. But the argument was, if there's not this Barnum, there would have been another one, because they had no intention of the PPP doing or what it has done or what it was planning to do. Not at all. And they did have firm shared governance and all sorts of things to try to mitigate that situation. So that, but Barnum did make the same mistake, Cherry Jigan. I'm telling you, ideology, maybe your Calypsonian is right about this. Same mistake. Once in power, he's deciding now that, hey, 1976, was it?
74?
74.
Declaration of Sophia.
I am going to, our party is a Marxist-Leninist. Suddenly, and but bad luck for him, Reagan come to office in 81 or Ronald
1980.
Reagan.
Yes, 1881.
And that was the end of his Marxism, Leninism, because Reagan took him on. That again demonstrates about this thing about sovereignty. It has its limits. It's not, we are sovereign. We can do whatever we want. And it is not going to be. You're not sovereign in that way. Effectively, you have to look around you. You have to have and see how the power shifts and all of that before you make any thing. And Barnum almost end up at the same place with Chetty, because now Reagan come to power and was traveling in town. So that is more or less Norman Manley in Jamaica too. He was
Michael Manley.
Michael Manley.
Yeah.
Radical socialist, same story, you know. But you have to realize what they are teaching you in school about sovereignty and all of that is theory. At the end of the day, there's no world government, and the people with the nuclear weapon, as he says, they got the upper.
Yes, Dr. Henry Jeffrey here. You know, about 15 years ago, the Caribbean Studies Association, an annual conference that we all went to, some of the elder scholars made the argument that you're making, is that for us in the Caribbean and for small states, we are not sovereign. And I remember those of us who were younger, coming out of the 1970s and 1980s, were shocked that here were our leading scholars really saying that the Caribbean doesn't have any sovereignty. And we eventually, I think, learned I would say the hard way, that indeed, sovereignty in a real philosophical and practical sense doesn't exist, because it can be compromised at any time that those who have nuclear weapons and control the world decide that it should. And I think we have come full circle. Here we are again with President Trump, Donald Trump, deciding that he's going to update the Monroe Doctrine, and the Caribbean is laid bare as far as our sovereignty is concerned. We are realizing that either our sovereignty is limited or it don't really mean much once the superpowers begin to square off. Please share the link, because we are going to get to Guyana. Dr. Jeffrey, your column this weekend caught my eye, as you usually do, but it also caught some other eyes. Norton and Campbell must lead democratic revival, says Henry Jeffrey. You have been talking about the quality of democracy in Guyana, and how it is being undermined. But this is a bold statement, is that you're saying Norton, who just lost an election big, as we would say, who led the People's National Congress to its lowest percentage of the electorate in its entire history. You are asking him and the leader of the parliamentary group, Terence Campbell, who does not have much political experience. In fact, this is his really first foray into real politics. He briefly joined you and Ralph in Anog and so on, but withdrew very quickly. So here you're asking a leader who is said to have been defeated in a big way, and one who is new, that they must lead democratic revival in Guyana. Talk us through that.
Oh, David, because Norton was a victim, essentially twice at least, he will say he's a victim. When they had, I think it was in 2015, the leadership thing, and there was a challenge between David Granger and Carl Greenidge, you remember. And Norton, I believe, was the person who was like the managers for Greenidge's team. And, I was at Cool Square at the time, and I was supporting Greenidge, to be truthful. And they call and say, Greenidge won. I said, well, we thought he would. They called and said it. And a whole thing happens, table overthrown and recounting ballot and all of that. And then Greenidge lost. And a lot of, apparently, this caused a great furor in the PNC itself. And Norton was there as the manager of a Granger team. Here comes again a situation in which Norton went to the polls. Of course, they stopped the primary thing since about 2011, I think. And because once you become an incumbent, they did that. I don't think it was a good thing. You should still be challenged, but that's another story. And you end up here again, and Norton went to the polls. Norton won. Alexander, who is quite good as this, was the person who ran the. Norton won. What's the point of you talking about democracy? And when people win, you are trying to change it. If I go to a meeting, if I go to a party thing to vote, I'm voting for some people. When I lose, my job is to say, well, I've lost. I don't think he's the best man to be doing this, but to try to coalesce and try to run a show with what the democratic vote has shown. And I think I said that because I think Mr. Norton was a victim of this. This outcome here it's for 2 years. People, all the times before elections, since Norton, it's years that people are after him complaining. When, as I said on your program, even raising issues of rape and all of that. When people do these things, you say, what is going on here? Didn't this man win an election? Didn't one of their own people who's on election come and say this man won? You just you just can't throw away people when you feel like if you're in a democracy. Democracy, as I said, there is a freedom in the social setting. People, we like our individual lives to do what we like, but we are social beings. And in a society, my democratic right is what makes me free. So if I go and vote for Norton, and you just can't believe that, overthrow him in some way, going to him, you're going to Norton and say, give up my decision. It's my decision that he should be. You're really asking him to give up so that we can win or give up because you're not the right kind of person. It's got to be. There's nobody else because the old guard and the PNC were the ones that was doing to win. What win one, if you want to call it that, as a sham. There was nothing. Because this is what Norton went through with that God. Where were they at election time? When you talk about the PNC went to election, I always smile which PNC went to election. Half, maybe less than half of the PNC went to election. So at the last minute, the others were just bailing and going to win and going and say that. And, come on. So you can't judge nothing, the future, from what happened at this election because of the struggle that Norton put up for his democratic rights. And nobody should, and that's why, indeed, that I said that he should lead it. He has a right to sit down now with Norton and make the PNC. It is the most democratic country party in Ghana. This couldn't happen in the PPP. They're democratic centralism. They close down democracy before it starts. But the point is that he has gone through this, and he has an obligation in a sense, because political parties themselves must become democratic if we are really to have a liberal democratic order in Ghana.
Dr. Jeffrey, let me pin you down because some people, some of who I have great respect for, have characterized this win, the movement of some of the voters from the PNC-based African Guyanese to win, as a popular rebellion. Would you use that characterization, that description?
Listen, even if you wish to use it, you can't use it in the context of what occurred. I just told you what occurred.
Yeah.
It is not possible for you to make much of wins. First of all, you are, as a student of politics, no, you don't make any, you should make any extrapolations from one election for a start. Right. Good. And afterward, this is not even half election, so to speak. What are you going to extrapolate and talk about all of that? I think that anybody not made a great showing given what he faced. Half the PNC, the old guard in the PNC didn't put a foot forward to do proper campaigning or nothing. Let that happen in the PVP and see. I am saying to you, that is what occurred. And you can't extrapolate from that to all these magical things they're talking about. You need at least 3 election cycles before, so they say, before you can make any proper thing. All you're doing is speculating wildly and politically and opportunistically. That's all you're facing from all of these people. And a whole lot of sycophants out there doing that because they want to impress this person, impress that person. But you can't, given what Norton went through, no sensible person can tell me you can make this a benchmark of what would happen in the future in the PNC.
What would happen in the future in the PNC? Please share the link. Dr. Henry Jeffrey is here tonight, and of course we are asking real questions, not those simplistic questions that you see. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to people, because everyone has a right to use whatever platform they have at their disposal to ask questions and to raise issues. But on this program, we tend to go beyond the obvious. And as clear as you have been listening to me over the last couple of weeks, is that I share Dr. Jeffrey's view. This whole thing that racial, ethnic voting has come to an end and so forth, that we have pushed back against it. I am not sure whether you read Comrade Ralph's column this week, in which he sought to deal with the question of ethnic politics.
Yes, I
And
did.
yes, and he talked about moderation, that the PNC has to moderate, and that
Why
Campbell.
don't the Indian people moderate and vote for the for the blacks?
Okay,
But
take it away. Take it away.
you have a situation where almost to a man they voted for the PPP. Almost to a man. Well, I say man, woman, right?
Yes.
Nothing. And the PPP, the voting population in this country, don't worry, that's 700 something. It's about 515, 513,000 people. And almost to a man, the Indians vote for the PPP. Now you tell me, if racial politics done, why do they vote elsewhere?
That's right. And Ralph, who obviously I have a lot of respect for his insight, but he avoided that issue. He made an analysis of ethnic politics, but only talk about what happened among African Guyanese and completely ignored what happened among
He's
Indian
not alone. The PPP wants to feed black people the nonsense that ethnic voted finished, but they got their people voting ethnicity and selling it in their communities every single hour of the day. But they want black people to buy into that nonsense. And it is totally not necessary. Because, I mean, ethnic voting and no ethnic voting should not go. Suriname, the Jukers and all them, they don't vote. Who cares? What you have to do now, that you have to have the system of governance that takes that into consideration and neutralizes it. It is not for tell people don't vote for your race, don't vote for this and don't vote for that. They vote for who they want to. But the PPP wants to do that because it had a domination and it has socialized its people into this racial voting, and they are continuing it. And so that is why it is doing it. And it and its minions are all over the place that racial voting finished. The easy answer is, why then did the Indian people vote for the PNC? Are they all racist?
The other view is that the view held by people like yourself and myself, in that we highlighted the economic dispossession of African Guyanese, the disempowerment of African Guyanese economically and others, that they're saying that that message is partly why the PNC lost the election.
Why did the blacks go and vote for the PPP?
That's right.
Why they ain't go and vote for the PPP? The PPP ain't get no significant votes from. They get them from the Amerindians, who they have been suppressing for all this time. Not me saying so. The Amerindians going to an international community and saying that the PPP is suppressing their group. So not me. I look at the African Guyanese and look at them, and I know that they've been doing it for 20 years. They have been doing this drive from the Linden Fund to everything else. I put in athletic track in Lenora, every single destroying all the TVET institutions in the villages. When black people, as Indians, were in agriculture, Africans were in trades and so on. They destroy all. They try everything possible to stagnate. And that's why perhaps Mohammed knew, because he was their friend. And that's why he knew he can use some money too. He can use some money and deal with it. So no. PPP says, what? It's the PPP who drove black people into poverty deliberately. And I've said it 100 times. I've said it. You do an ethnic disparity analysis if you wish. You are the government. You got resources, do all sort of crap. If people are spinning it around, going so far as to call you an apartheid state, do call and have an independent ethnic disparity analysis. It is not much money, well, not even $1 million US dollars. So what are you doing? And to have to demonstrate quite clearly that that is not so, but they would never do that. for obvious reasons.
Good evening to all of you who have joined us, whether you're joining us from Ghana. A special shout out to the people of Anse Grove. I was reliably informed that we do have lots of friends in Anse Grove, and I paid a visit there last week. And I have to come back to Anse Grove, but to all the sisters, mostly sisters, but there's some brothers there who support our brand of politics, and we want to say thanks. Good evening to you, Anse Grove. Good evening to all of you. Those of you who are joining us from Linden, a special good evening to you. And of course, our sisters and brothers in the diaspora who continue to keep the faith with Guyana. Dr. Jeffrey, last week, the Americans revealed that they have indicted the Mohammeds, and it caused quite a stir in Guyana. And one of the questions I ask, why did this indictment come after the elections? Why did they not bring this indictment before the election? Would you like to take a stab at that?
Boss, the Americans, well, the Americans told you they will find a way to deal with the situation.
Yes.
Didn't they?
Yes, the ambassador said that.
The ambassador says, don't worry, we will find a way. Because you can't have all sorts of people who we consider are criminals. We're going to have to deal with them and all of that. It is your duty to deal with them. We are hoping that you would have done so before. But you did not do it. That's why I maintain Mohammed and the PPP are friends. I said it in your program the last time. I say it again. And this time, I am saying it. They already delivered Region 4 to PPNC, to the PPP. And they already almost delivered Region 10. It's just that the way the decision has got to be made would implicate the PPP. So they are friends. It is only logical, both logically. This one just spoke to about the Region 4. There might be an empirical piece of the evidence, but the logical piece of the evidence is clear.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here. Note. Go ahead, Dr. Jeffrey.
The PPP isn't acting against the Mohammed because they want to. They are acting against Mohammed because the Americans there on their back. That is and they understand the limitations of talk about sovereignty. So they have to deal with the Mohammeds. Now, come on, the Mohammeds aren't stupid. They know that the PPP have to deal with them. Don't wait all this thing PPP coming after us and all, that's just astroturfing. They know that this PPP has no choice but to come against them. What do you think the PPP going to do? They're not stupid. They know. And the question therefore arises of how they can make the best of this. And they make the best of this. And maybe because they are friends, they sit down and talk politics all the time. The Mohammeds become involved in the political process. Firstly, historically, that's not new. If you go New York and let you go, all the gangsters in New York, when they make up a lot of money and things, they just try to buy over the local community to secure their own security. You know that from Al Capone right down, it was part of the process. If you only got to look at the old gangster movies to see them doing this all the time, and they must be still doing it. So it's not new for people like that with money to get into politics and try to buy over people. But given the ethnic divisions in the country, they could have done the PPP a great favor. The truth is, how the old guard of the APNU behaved, ingratiated themselves in the whole process. Mohammed got more votes than he would. Mohammed got more. I thought he couldn't get that amount of votes. He ended up getting more votes than we thought he had. But the African votes went for Mohammed and not for the PPP, as their 20 years story was trying to make it out. And that is where we are. So up to December and the end of this and the beginning of this year, the PPP was still giving Mohammed money. Bank of Ghana thing, you saw it, I saw it. They were not treating Mohammed as the Americans thought. If we say this about the man, this is what you have to do. You have to raise cases on. If you wouldn't indict him, we will. And that is where we are at.
Yes. Dr. Henry Jeffrey, thanks again for your insight, and welcome to all of you. Brother Leon Saddle from Ansgrove. Yes, Leon, we met here in Buxton, and whenever we go to Ansgrove, you're not there. Good evening to you, and good evening to Ingrid Hamer, another Ansgrovian, and Stacy, another Ansgrovian, and all our Ansgrove sisters and brothers who are on. Sister Simona, called me and said, Dr. Hines, I went to Ansgrove today to look for signatures, and they tell me that there's WPA, they ain't giving out the signature like that. She first alerted me to what she called the WPA nest in Ansgrove. And so we were, in the midst of all of this, I mean, people, this thing that our people, especially African Guyanese, have no time with radical politics, have no time about, the discrimination against them. As Dr. Jeffrey said here tonight, is all part of the plan, the domination plan. It's all part of the domination plan. What is key about what Dr. Jeffrey just said, contrary to what I've been seeing on Facebook, is that they handed Region 4 to the PPP. Handed Region 4 to the PPP. That's what they did. And all this talk about APNU joining the PPP in Region 10, APNU put up a candidate and the PPP voted for the APNU candidate. APNU did not vote for a PPP candidate. So all this spinning that is going on Facebook by some people, it's really unfortunate. But we've got to keep our eyes on the prize, because there is more to come. There is more to come. As Dr. Jeffrey has said, WIN is an ally of the PPP. And it's as clear as day by their actions. Dr. Jeffrey, this whole business about the WIN going to court to force, you would know, I can't remember whether you were labor. Yes, you were a labor minister.
Mm-hmm.
So what has developed there in Linden, where it is said the minister has to cast the casting vote, and WIN is objecting to that and saying there should be a runoff. Educate us a little bit on that process.
I am. There's not a Ministry of Labor problem. Essentially, that is all local government. Sorry,
and
all the laws APNU put into place.
Yes,
it's y'all put all them laws into place. You put a local government commission without making it an independent commission, left it in the hands of the politicians, and now when the politicians use it, they're complaining. And not at the time, people did not say, look at these things. Indeed, those laws got some very serious difficulties. People don't even realize it yet. But I'm saying, I mean, that is not a labor issue so far
Yes,
as
yes.
I'm
I
concerned.
mistakenly said labor. I meant local government. I meant
Yeah.
local government.
So yes, it said that the minister will make the final decision because APNU must think they're going to stay in power forever, so they can always make the decision.
Yeah.
I don't wait. Anytime you can stay in power forever, you don't live in a democracy. You don't. So first thing you have to do is make proper arrangements for when you are out of power, because power has to be dispersed first, and then governments have to change. Anytime you got government doing the same thing all the time, I said it's not a democracy. Voting is not a democracy.
Yeah. The court, Dr. Jeffrey, handed down, upheld an okay submission by the lawyer for Takumo Ogunse. But it said a couple of things. It said first that Ogunse was reporting what a diplomat told him, and so the charge against him for his speech, it was reported speech. The second thing the court said, it said that if you are speaking and critiquing your own ethnic group, that can be racial hostility. And the third thing he said, the court said, is that he made his remarks on a public platform where he has some latitude. Your thoughts on the ruling of the court in the Takumo?
Yeah, of course, it's political time. If you start stopping people from talking about the other party, how are the people supposed to be informed? You are in a specific place and time, and you have information that people should know. Tell you, I mean, in anything you do, you can go too far and personalize things and so all of that. But once you are keeping it within the realm of the political quarrel, and you are distributing it according to some, well, it's not too empirical, but certainly some level of argumentation and knowledge, then so that's how it should be. You can't say what you got to prove every point you want to say and all that sort of nonsense. No, particularly at election time, you have to allow the leeway that politicians can speak. You can't do what they say. You can't say anybody corrupt in parliament. You are going to parliament where the speaker said you didn't realize that there's something like that. You can't use the word corruption in order to change it. You can't use the word corruption in parliament or something like that. He goes to India, he comes back one moment, Modi do something, who's the whole autocrat himself. Do something, and he come here and say you can't use corruption or something like that in parliament. Yeah.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here tonight. Dr. Jeffrey, have you been across to the west side? Have you used the new bridge yet?
Well, no. I'm gonna give it time to settle down.
much ado about nothing with naming the bridge after Mr. Jagdeo.
As I said in my article this week, if you want people to, I wrote an article on it in the Star News. The amount of things, but I was telling some friends last night that people come Burnham and said name after him. It's amazing. That bridge, people call it the longest floating bridge, and they come Burnham and say we call the LFSB bridge.
Yes, I remember that.
Burnham laughed and he said, self-praise is no recommendation. Your mother never told you that. Self-praise is no recommendation. Anyway, but he laughed. You realize President College, I wrote an whole article in Stanford News. You know President College started as Randy Chandy Singh got up one day at Central Exec and said that we was Lenin anniversary or something like that. and said the party should name something after Lenin. And he chose the primary school at Success. Because remember, Aqaba was next door, I think.
Yes,
But,
yes.
So he came up with this thing. Everybody seemed to agree. All right, well, next week we're going to talk about how this can be figured out and so on. Kit Nascimento must be know he was around then at the time. You know, by next week somebody says, why we going to have a school, a college to Lenin, and we have our own president, and we don't have a school for him, and we ain't got nothing like that for him. The school should be called Forbes Burnham School. Burnham. I don't know if he was at a meeting, but about 2 weeks later, the matter raised again. And someone raised up and said, hey, how are we going to have that as Forbes Burnham College? And that means the President College and QC so big and they're so small, and this is a presidency. So they decided, hey, Amy Green was there. They decided after something, all right, we got to get it bigger. And Dave Burnham said, I want nothing to do with these things. There was one talk of making a museum for Burnham. Burnham said, listen to me. Y'all would soon come and find the pen I wrote within nursery school and put it in something. I want nothing to do with this. So they decided, well, Burnham don't want it. It's going to be the President College. And because of that, it needs to be bigger than QC. That's how you have residential and all that. You think it's two things people just come and tell you must be named after you. And if you want to take it on, take it on. I mean, I know. Yeah. Bart want to be called Bridge after you. And this is a dangerous time to take on these things. People throwing them down all over the place, breaking up all sorts of statues. You must be got to have a good background to go and take these things. You
know. Ernest Elliott is saying he was at that meeting. Yes. Good evening, Ernest. Old PNC man. Ernest said he was at the meeting, Henry. So we know Dr. Henry Jeffrey is not lying because we have an old PNC man, brother Ernest Elliott from Golden Grove, Haslington, the Backless area, saying that he was at the meeting. Dr. Jeffrey, as usual, it's always a pleasure having you and to for you to give your insight on these matters. It certainly is something that we look forward to every other Tuesday. Thank you very much, my brother.
And thank you very much for having me, you and your audience. Thank you very much.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey, one of our more popular guests here on Politics 101. We are keeping on and exploring all of these matters. We started off tonight with the Black Stallion, isms and schism, Grenada. It was in the month of October in 1953 also when the British invaded the then British Guyana. We were still a colony. We had gotten adult suffrage, and for the first time, adults could vote, and they voted for the United PPP. Burnham, Jagan, Quayana, all of them, Martin Carter. They were all in the PPP, and they took power after winning the election with 60-something% of the seats. And they served for 133 days. And they passed the Labor Act, which was going to give trade unions the right, or give workers the right to form trade unions. And the British, pushed by the Americans, invaded Guyana after the government was there for 133 days. A number of the ministers, Sidney King, Martin Carter, were imprisoned, and so forth. Guyana had an interim government from 53 to 57. We didn't have a constitution during that period. Some quote unquote what we call civil society people govern the country. Of course, between 53 and 57, in 1955, we had the first split in the PPP when the Burnhamite faction left. Forbes Burnham, J.P. Lachman Singh, Jainarine Singh, and a number of Burnham supporters in Georgetown left. And then there was a second split of the PPP in 1956. This was when Sidney King and Martin Carter, Rory Westmus, and so on left. So there were two splits between 53 and 56. We did not get elections again until 1957. So the Americans invaded in October of 1953, invading their own colony because at that time they voted the legislation to give workers the right to organize in trade unions. They had also passed laws taking away schools from the churches and making the schools public schools. In 1955, those were crimes that warranted one of the most powerful armies in the world to land troops in Guyana. So we are now what, 72 years after the British landed troops here in October of 1953. Just a little bit of history there for you. It was also in 1953, we had Fidel Castro and others making the first attack on the government, the Batista government in Cuba, the Moncada attack. And Fidel and others were caught and they were imprisoned. And when they came out of prison, they then reassembled in Mexico. And from there, they made another attempt, and this time in 1959, and they triumphed, the Cuban Revolution triumphed. So just some history there in 1953 when the troops arrived in Guyana, the British troops, they used to call them Limeys. They arrived in Guyana, they found Guyana very quiet. They found the cricket match between India and the West Indies at border. And they were told that they were coming to a place where people were tearing up and breaking down and so on and so forth. So just some tidbits of history there for you. October, the PPP like to say October is when they bring back democracy in 1992, you know, but October is more important for us in other ways. Of course, in October 1983 was when America invaded Grenada and put down the Grenadian Revolution. That's what we have in common. One of the things we have in common, Guyana and Grenada. 1953, the Americans invaded Guatemala because Guatemala nationalized the United Fruit Company. And the leader there was Jacob Arbenz. They overthrew Arbenz. 1953, America also invaded Iran and overthrew Prime Minister Mossadegh. 1953, in Africa, the Mau Mau Rebellion. Africans taken to the jungles and fighting back against British troops to put an end to colonialism in Kenya. And it was the Mau Mau Rebellion. The soldiers, the freedom fighters were in the jungle and they weren't combing their hair. So that's where Natty comes from. And the young people in Jamaica, they would see movies with these Natty men fighting the British in Kenya. And it is there that dreadlocks came from. The Jamaicans at that time the Rastafarians saw these men with matted hair in Kenya, and they adopted it, and that's where dreadlocks came from in our Caribbean. Martin Carter captured the Mau Rebellion, saying South Africa, they drink the blood of black women. In Kenya, he talked about what was doing there. In fact, Kwayana and Martin Carter and others went on a hunger strike when they were in prison at that time. They went on a hunger strike in solidarity with the Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya. So 1953 is pregnant with a lot of history. And I know you all get vexed with me sometimes because you all always say that Dr. Hines, you should spend some more time on these things. And which brings me to our course on Pan-Africanism, which is, we have to push it back a little bit because of some logistical problem. But the course will now start on the 1st of November. It's going to run for 7 weeks. It's going to be on Saturdays from 4 to 6. And it's going to be via Zoom. So please, the information is being scrolling at the bottom of the screen. You can call the number there and enroll. A lot of you have already enrolled, and we are. And talking about Pan-Africanism, it was in October. Ras Tom Dalgetty came to see me here in Buxton last week and reminded me that in October, it was October 1944, was the very important 5th Pan-African Congress held in Manchester, England. And it was at that conference, that Pan-African conference, where George Padmore of Trinidad, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Ras McConnell, who's a Buxtonian from Buxton Front, and he had migrated to England in the early part of the century. He was the financier of the Pan-Africanist movement. He owned restaurants in Manchester. He eventually migrated to Africa and died in Kenya about 20 years ago. He was a Buxtonian from Buxton Front. Ras McConnell, George Padmore, Kwame Nkrumah, they held that Pan-African conference in October, I think October 13th to 18th, and that conference, and it was at that conference that they planned the independence of Africa. They planned the independence of Africa at that Pan-African Congress in October 1944. So this month is important for so many ways. I'm giving out some of the information there, but we will learn about the various Pan-African Congresses, the meaning of Africanism, and how important the role played by the Caribbean and Guyana. As I said, Ras T. McConnell was the financier of the Pan-Africanist movement. Dr. Peter Millard, a Jamaican, was instrumental in that conference. He was the head of the League of Colored People. And I think shortly after that, our own John Carter became the secretary of the League of Colored People. I don't think John might have been at the 44 conference, but he joined the LCP. Dr. Peter Millard, a Jamaican doctor, medical doctor, he was the head of the League of Colored People at that conference. And of course, the first Pan-African conference took place at Manchester, England in 1944, 1900, sorry. 1900 was the first Pan-African Congress, and it was called by Henry Sylvester Williams, a lawyer. In those days, they called them barrister, from Trinidad and Tobago, all right, from Trinidad. And he was instrumental in calling that first Pan-African conference. The great W.E.B. Du Bois went to that conference. So the Caribbean has played an instrumental role in the Pan-Africanist movement. And so we are not going to be learning anything foreign. We are going to be learning about our own history. And it's important for us as an African people to understand that we have not stood still after we came across the Middle Passage, that a lot of what is now Guyana and the Caribbean, both at the level of ideology and at the level of practical politics, was pioneered by African people. And we will never allow ourselves to forget that. And we will never allow our young people to believe they drop from coconut tree, all right? That they come from a rich history. So that's what this course is about. And I thank the young people. I thank the pastor who pushed me in this direction. Lots to do, but we have got to do it. We've got to do it. And I have a little bit more time now to do that kind of stuff. And so I hear you all, and we are going to make a start. Thank you all. Thank you all. Dr. Jeffrey, as usual, was on the ball tonight. And we are going to be back tomorrow night where we continue to do what we have been placed on God's earth to do. And that is to constantly free ourselves. And in the process of freeing ourselves, we help to free humanity.